Well, I think we're a little bit further along than we were before. So anyway, we'll go ahead and call JAC back to order. Do we take a roll when we're recessed so long? Do we have to take a roll again? So talking with my co-chairman and I, what I think we'll do is we'll just start, and I think we're gonna, for those in the room, I think we're gonna put the spreadsheet up on the line that kind of lists out. We're gonna go through the conserved ARPA. What we often in the room refer to above the line. We're gonna go through a conserved ARPA and just compare where we are. And then we're just going to comparison of where our respective bodies are, our respective committees are, and then we'll come back and we'll debate and take action on each one. So the first one is kind of explain thing, go to the bottom, kind of see where we are at the end as far as where everybody is, and then come back and we'll go ahead and come back and start taking motions on those items. And if there's something that there's some connection, I understand there may be there's in some couple places there may be connection between above the line and below the line between conserved ARPA and direct ARPA. And when we talk about it, just explain that, and then we can kind of keep that in mind. Does that sound? And then also the other thing Dawn, to just give you a heads up, as we come through, there may be some other ideas that we want to revisit in round robin when we go back to the budget. There's some of this that we may go back and refine some things in the budget based with direct ARPA dollars in a few places, or at least have some conversations about that. And so we may ask you to mark some of those. So when we do round robin, we make sure we bring those up. Anything else, Mr. Co-Chair? All right. So Don, why don't you go ahead and we'll just go line by line and just and we'll just talk about where we are.
Mr. Chairman, the first several and all of these that start with a 1 are conserved general funds. And the first one for your consideration in Governor's Letter number 17 for those viewing is a federal infrastructure and private sector energy matching funds. The request was for $100 million to be available from the LSRA.
And so what we did on that, Dave, did you keep track of those? You want me to?
Which one? I'm sorry.
We're just going down line by line. So what we did is we wanted to kind of what I think some of the things we talked about before, we wanted to reduce that to, we proposed or talked about reducing it to 75 and moving it and having it all from SIPA.
Mr. Chairman, I think we would concur with that.
Then you talked about Puri.
And then, and then the other thing, and then in the budget, we were talking about in the budget also maybe going back and in the matching funds in the budget is taking that from 28 million down to 25 million in the matching funds where we talked about those grants for the Pore Space Core Lab.
Mr. Chairman, did you have our room bugged? We would concur with that action.
So anyway, but that'll be a pin for round robin because that's in the matching funds division of UW.
And Mr. Chairman, the reduction from 28 to
25.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, still from SIPA as we did in the budget 2 days ago or yesterday. And we concur with that.
Next was Governor's Whip.
And so then I think we still have the hydrogen excellence. We didn't do anything with that.
We agree. 2 million for UW SER energy policy development at UW Hydrogen Hub plus Center of Excellence.
Right. We didn't do anything with it. We're still zeroed out on investment thesis growth.
Concur.
We were still zeroed out on special projects, economic opportunity management, and community business engagement.
Concur.
We didn't change. We left the 650 in for energy transformation funds, grant managers and writers.
Concur.
We didn't do anything with energy of the future, but it's still zeroed out.
Agree.
The geophysics survey, we zeroed it out here, but it's in the budget. We weren't going to change. We didn't have any changes to that.
Mr. Chairman, meaning you still want to do it, it's just a matter of,
Yeah, I mean.
doesn't show up in this.
Yeah, it's not, and Don's got, it does not show up twice anyway, so we didn't do anything with that.
Mr. Chairman, that does not currently appear in the budget. You approved the governor's letter for the
Oh, that's right.
economic
Okay.
challenges.
Thank you for correcting me that. So yeah, we haven't changed that. On the whip, we didn't really change that, but from our discussion earlier, Don, you told us that if we, because we're only authorizing year one, that profiles out at 27,500,000. So we didn't change that.
We agree with your statement.
Then we didn't make any other changes. We were still zeroed out all the way down to the wildlife crossings. Oh, we zeroed out cultural trust fund.
And we thought maybe 5 million.
Okay. And that's, I zeroed it out. That's why I skipped over it. So I apologize. Then we didn't change anything in humanities grants. The wildlife crossings we left alone.
We agree.
And the funding of the the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, we reduced from 85 to 75.
And we thought start at the governor's rec of 75 and then split that and went to 35.
Okay.
And it's, I'll admit my math is not a perfect split when I say 35, but we went to a whole digit and said 35.
Okay. And then we reduced our, where before we had, I think it's 1,882,000, whatever that number was, for PMTF. We reduced that to 100 million.
Mr. Chairman, we zeroed savings to the PMTF.
Okay. And then we did this. We did the same thing with Common School Permanent Land Fund. We took it from that number, what, 182.7, whatever that number was, down to 100 million.
And we agree 100 million common school.
All right. So, and then I think when I was just talking with the co-chairman in the room here, told me that you had something that was an interconnection between what we just did and something below the line. Can you explain the interconnection to us?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, on the below the line, and it somewhat interacts in above the line. And our thought is on WildLink, the governor's proposal 2-9, towards the bottom of the page, where he does RIS or WildLink. I should be more clear. The RIS or WildLink, he has 35 million. And what we were thinking is in the YDOT budget, there is 18 million roughly in highway dollars spent for WildLink projects. And so our thought was to switch all of the WildLink projects that are currently using highway dollars to ARPA Direct, and then use highway dollars to pay for RIS.
Or put them on the highway?
Pardon me?
Or allow them to put them on the highway, but you free that up for them in.
And then authorize RIS for 18 million of expenditure so they could start the RIS project with language that says the CIO of ETS must approve the project essentially.
Okay.
And we'd refine that language, but really we want to make sure this new ETS CIO gets involved with the project.
And reviews the
RFI.
bid process to make sure that it's opened up to the maximum number of qualified.
Okay, we had talked about that. Mr. Vice President, you kind of led us through that discussion. You have any comment? So we did talk about this. It was a little bit different. Sorry to think fast.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Larson.
just for the body's clarification, the reason we kind of done that is we heard yesterday, WildLink could use ARPA Direct, RIS couldn't. And so we're going up and snatching their highway funds to fund RIS and using ARPA dollars to fund Wild Lake.
And then, Mr. Chairman, our thought is if there's not enough in the budget, there's probably not enough highway dollars to get RIS rolling. And so that's where the interconnection to the above the line occurs. Is there's probably closer to $10 million in highway dollars that would be available for ARPA Direct. And we probably need $20 million to get RIS going and started. And that's where the interconnection would come about of putting in $10 million of general fund or conserved general fund so that there's enough money there to do the project. And the additional language would say, this is the legislative authority to go start RIS based on the letter we received from our Transportation Committee Chairman.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we were on the same line. We wanted to shift everything out of YDOT's budget that was ARP eligible, whether it was all of WildLink, all of RIS, anything in YDOT's budget, that we could shift over onto ARP dollars and free that up for use on our highway. So it's an offset. So it really comes down as to what's eligible and what's not. If RIS is not eligible, then it would be consistent with what you guys are talking about. Now, we're also aware of that there's going to be a substantial infusion through the infrastructure bill coming into YDOT, maybe as much as $400 million in the next couple of years. That if we give them the authorization and they can use transportation dollars for that, you know, for those non-ARPA eligible things, which is the discussion is how much do we want to free up now without knowing in the transportation bill whether all of RIS is potentially available for funding or not. So that's kind of the logic that we went through. So it comes down to what's eligible now and what do we expect coming down the pike.
I think we're talking the same principal idea. It's just a matter of a few.
Senator Drew's been trying to get my attention. What is this? Sure. We'll be right back. Just really quick. Excuse me. Excuse us.
Welcome if you got 'em.
We'll come back to order. So anyway, we just had a rousing discussion and instruction about YDOT financing. So we appreciate that. Make sure we're not, again, stepping on our own necktie. So with that, Mr. Chairman, is there any, so I think following kind of what we were talking about, at this point, I think we would go back up to the top and start down and see if and go ahead and work the top section. Okay, so let's go back up to the top and we'll just go line by line. And so essentially this will be,
So we know where we're at.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through action yesterday by the Joint Appropriations Committee, you have 252, and assuming Governor's Letter number 17, because that's the baseline for all of us, you have $252 million available from direct ARPA and $1.822 billion in the LSRA.
I'm sorry, say that number again, please.
$1.822 billion in the LSRA. You also have a shortfall in SIPA, but we have used general funds to fix that shortfall per your global recommendation on capital construction.
And the shortfall is still the
36.6 million.
36.6. Okay.
And then what's available nothing's available in conserve funds?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there is money available in conserved funds, but that is incorporated in the LSRA balance. So if you spend these, but amounts available in the conserved general funds is 328 million.
And so with the numbers that we just did today, that on this reduction, our side, their side, how did that impact that our bottom line?
I don't know.
We haven't taken the action yet.
Right.
Yeah, we want to know numbers so that, because we want to, what's important is where we land when we're done, I guess. But I mean, I got 25 difference of reduction from the governor's 100 million, 3 from SIPA, and then depending on where you go, it'd be useful to know
Mr.
bottom
Chairman,
line
I
is
think
the House position.
I may roughly have that number.
So
I think roughly, if we go with what the Senate kind of was leaning towards as we walked through this a few minutes ago, they'd be at about 1.5, maybe 1.51 million. And if we've kind of followed the House's thinking, we'd be at about 1.61 million, and really billion, excuse me, in the LSRA. If that's the number we're talking about, it's the LSRA. And really the difference is we don't save 100 million in the PMTF, and the Senate is proposing, because that's really the largest component. The rest is a
Yeah.
small differential. And so,
Yeah, 5 million for cultural trust.
so, it's going to be 1.5 roughly on Senate proposals left in LSRA and 1.6 House. And it's that 100 million roughly that is the difference in the
Well, plus
PMTF.
there's the 40 million for the wildlife trust fund. So it actually would be 1.5.
Yeah, it'd be I guess it'd be a little more than that, because the House does there's about a 30 million, 130 million difference between the two positions roughly. And so 100 million.
Same as you.
yeah, they just didn't they made no deposit into PMTF. Yeah, that's the difference.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Dawn, go ahead and let's go to one. And obviously if you're at home and keeping score, we're going to be keeping track of the direct and conserved and SIPA dollars as we make these, as we do these proposals today. So with that, we're back up on item 1, federal infrastructure and private sector energy matching funds. Motion is Gov's RAC. Is there any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative.
I would move on item number 1, federal infrastructure, private sector energy matching funds, to reduce that number to 75 million and change the funding source to SIPA.
Second.
There any discussion, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So now just if we're keeping score, Dawn or Elizabeth, the effect that we just had, what did that do? See if I'm now tracking how this works.
Mr. Chairman, you have moved the balance in the LSRA from 1.822 to 1.847. You've gained $25 million.
And what, did it have an effect on SIPA?
It made it worse off. So
Okay,
now, rather than $36 million in the hole, which we are automatically correcting through this, it would be $111 million in the hole.
yep, okay, thank you. And all right, so next item is health energy development. And as we do this, we're effectively we're going through, this is the equivalent of going through Governor's Letter 17. Is that correct, Don?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so energy policy development, UW Hydrogen Hub and Center of Excellence. Motion is Govzerac. Oh, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. Next item is investment thesis growth and I think it was a diagnosis or diagnostic asset-based economic development. $5 million.
Gov's rec,
Motion is Govzerac.
discussion? Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote on this.
Okay. Are there any questions? Everybody understand? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. All those opposed, say no.
No.
Motion is not adopted. It's failed. The next item is special projects, economic opportunity management and community business engagement. $2 million. These are for people in the governor's office and the WBC to deal with some of these special projects. And I think we've all talked about this before. So motion is Govzerac.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative.
I would encourage a no vote.
All right, all those in favor, any questions? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next item is energy transformation funds, grant managers and writers, $150,000. Everybody clear? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion is adopted. Next item is energy of the future for $2.5 million.
Gov's rec, vote no.
Motion is Goverac.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote.
Okay, thank you, Representative. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, go ahead, I want to register that. All those in favor, all those opposed say no. You know, it just took me aback there a minute. Motion is failed. Next item is geophysics survey to analyze Wyoming's mineral resource in the amount of $2 million.
Gov's rec.
Motion is Govzerac. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. The next item is the Wyoming, is it integration? We've always just called it WIP, but
Wyoming Innovations.
thank you. Wyoming Innovation.
Gov's rec.
Motion is Govzerac.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion to reduce the 55 million to 27.5 million
For the first year?
and fund the first year of the project. It would be funding phase 2 of the project, because I believe phase 1 has been funded already.
And, okay, we'll go ahead and take that motion. So the motion is Govzerac as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion is adopted. Mr. Co-Chair, I would like to further amend that that,
Yeah. Go ahead.
to ask that, so further amend that so that this money is to be expended only upon the authorization of the governor when he is satisfied with respect to the what the purposes are and what the measurables, or I guess we'll call metrics, that his office has decided are appropriate for the release and use of this money.
Mr.
And I just, and with a report to the JAC when he makes each determination in terms of expenditures.
Yeah,
And
ask him to advise the JAC of his actions.
Mr. Chairman, did that motion include authorizing one AWAC position within the governor's office to oversee the program?
We didn't address that. Well, why don't we hold that and then we'll come back and we'll further amend this. We're just on this footnote language. Any other questions or comments, friendly amendments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. Go ahead, further amendment. Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I'd further amend so that the authorization for the Wyoming Innovation Partnership Program include authorization for the governor to hire one AWAC position within the governor's office. And I don't know if you want a separate cap on the funding or
So
that or not.
just to modify that, that the funds would be up to $200,000 annually per, as long as the program is in effect for that position.
Okay, does everybody understand that? Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
My concerns, if that's a biennial number,
No, it's an annual.
that's an annual number.
That was the motion.
So just a little discussion on that. Do we need to set that number or just authorize the position, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, we need to set the number. Otherwise, it's going to fall within the ANI guidelines. And then it would fall into the criteria of the position that he hires into the spectrum of who's in his office now. What we want is a highly qualified professional who's going to come in here and has knowledge of this, that really is going to be more of a consultant almost and an administrator. And
Mr.
so it
Chair.
just needs to be a specially qualified individual.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that works because this is an AWAC position,
Right.
so we don't have to cover it. So that's rational level, I think, that would probably.
AWAC or consultant.
Yeah,
And
could
not-
do that.
Yeah, and I was just going to offer that as a friendly amendment, that the governor has the authority to do this out of either, this is an AWAC, or he can do it out of, or he can do it out of 900, I guess it'd be 900.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could do it out of 900. So we just let him flex that back and forth as whichever works out the best for him. Yes, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would it be friendly to the good co-chairman to, rather than set the dollar value, to just say this position is not subject to ANI HR requirements? And that way,
When it's a consultant, it's not already.
correct, when it's a consultant, it's not, but if they hire somebody, if we just said they don't have to, this one position, those requirements don't apply, then they could do what they need, and rather than setting a specific dollar amount for the position.
So this is pretty far down the weeds. So if you don't mind, let's ask Kevin. Kevin, from your vast experience in government and HR and all those things, can you tell us how much trouble we're causing right now?
Mr. Chairman, I think the contract aspect, as Chairman Nicholas said, if it's a 900 series, that gives them flexibility. As far as the rules go on AWAC, that's our rules. If it's an AWAC contract, then the responsibilities that are discovered through the process through HRD will gauge the necessity of that, and then they will make recommendations on what that AWAC contract would be under their rule set.
So the question would be, is there an advantage to creating in the footnote that if it's an AWAC, that it's exempted from those rules?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's an advantage to that. You're really cross the swords on that.
Yeah, I think we're starting to cross a line there that the governor's drawn in the sand.
But he doesn't want to.
Yeah, he may be happy to have that one, but he also may want to be consistent. So anyway,
I like the way you think.
So, Mr. Chairman.
so we'll go back to the co-chairman and see if that's a friendly amendment or not. Is that a friendly amendment, Mr. Co-chairman?
Yes.
It is a friendly amendment.
Which one?
The one about exempting it from the HRD.
No. And
No,
it's
that-
his motion. So.
So we're just back on the motion, which is one AWAC. Is it going to be limited to the 200 or not?
Up to.
Up to 200
Up to $200,000 per year,
and or it may be a consultant from 900.
and may be a consultant firm funded out of the 900 series.
Okay. Don, have you got it? All right, everybody got it? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Anything else on WHIP, year 2? All right. So I guess we'll just finish that one off. So WHIP years 2 and 3 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is 1-3 Agricultural Development Strategy. Motion is GovRec. Representative Walters,
I would encourage a no vote.
thank you. Questions? All those in favor say aye.
I rescind that motion. And I'll,
You know-
Mr. Chairman, permission to start paying attention.
You know, it's just, you know, you give people time off and they have to be retrained. What's up, can you say? Yeah. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next one is item 1.1-4 Kickstart Entrepreneurship Program Relaunch. Motion is GovRec. Representative Walters,
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote.
any questions? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion is failed. Next one is item 1-4, utilize the national level IEDC training programs. Motion is GovRec. Representative Walters,
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote.
any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next item is 1-5, excuse me, no, it's not. It's another 1-4 Community Revitalization Study. The motion is GovRec. Representative Walters,
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote.
thank you. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next item is the 1-4 Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund. The motion is GovRec.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there an amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would amend the Gov's rec of $10 million to $5 million.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Co-Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
I'm just propose a friendly amendment to that, given the position that we informally talked about of the Senate and our position. I would suggest that we split it and make it 2.5.
There a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion has carried. Any other further motions on Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund as amended? So I think we don't need to take further action. That's done. Is that right, Don? Next one is 1-5 Humanities Grants. Motion is GovRec. Representative Walters.
I would encourage a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion has failed. Someone plug in their computer. Running out of battery. The next item is,
Talking about my brain.
we've been at this a little bit. We all may need a recharge. Motion 1-5 Outdoor Recreation Product and Grant Program. the motion is Gov's rec.
That's right.
Are there any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
I would encourage a no vote.
All those in favor, any quick discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
Hold on.
No.
Oh, hang on, one time out. Is there?
I thought we were on wildlife crossings.
No, we're on outdoor rec.
I already voted
product
no on that.
program. Okay, all those, we're back on the vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion has failed. Next item is 1-5, and that's the I-80 is a misnomer. It's not I-80, it's just wildlife crossings. Going back, that's just a
Remnant.
staff Scrivener error, which has now been corrected. So, and it wasn't staff, it came that way, but in discussion with the governor, it's clear it's not restricted to I-80. So the motion is Gov's rec. Are there any amendments? Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
Requires a 5-to-1 match.
Right, and so I think the direction, Mr. Chairman, I think, so one, this is the 5-to-1 match. I think we're all on the same page. This is, it's anticipated that what we'll have is that there'll be federal funds that require a 20% match, and this is to have the
That would be a 4-to-1 match.
4-to-1.
4-to-1.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Representative
to
Walter.
the bringer of the motion, would it be friendly to say not less than 5-to-1
No, not less
or,
than.
Not less than 4-to-1.
or 4-to-1, whatever that amount is,
So-
so that they can go, encourage them to go more is the point of. my-
And we didn't want, and my recollection is, this was for federal fund, but my recollection is also that we've done license plates and there's been other programs that have raised private money to be matched with this too. So the intent is not to restrict it to federal match, but to any match. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then so the governor's, and so the agency lead on this is the WWNRT. Is that right? Or my question is where's the money going to be deposited? Is it going to be
It's
a
gonna be held,
YDOT
yeah.
or Game and Fish or where?
Going to the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund income account. I
Okay.
believe it's the income account where they spend their project.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Any other details? So Gov's rec as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next one is item 1-6, funding of the WNRT. The motion is Gov's rec, $75 million. Is there any motions?
Question.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
I would make a motion to reduce that to 35 million.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I would
Go ahead.
I would propose a friendly amendment again to split the position of the House and the Senate. So that would make it 55 million.
is that math right? You want to check us on our math? We should never do math in public. Okay. Is that a friendly amendment, Representative Walters?
Friendliest one I've heard today.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote on this and to adopt the Gov's rec. I just think this is a long-term investment in the state of Wyoming. It'll pay dividends for decades and decades to come. And I think we would be short-sighted to reduce these funds, given the light of the opportunity. And typically, these funds leverage on a 3 to 4-to-1 basis of other funds. You know, these are dividends that will pay for decades to the state of Wyoming and leverage a substantial amount of other money. So I think it's a great investment in the state of Wyoming, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, the motion before us is Gov's rec as amended to a $55 million appropriation. Correct? Everybody's clear. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do you want a timeout?
Well, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we'll go ahead and have a timeout.
We'd like to know.
All right, we'll go ahead and come back to order. I think we left off on, I think we're done, weren't we? Funding, I think we're item 1-6, funding of the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resources Trust.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
think, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think we had a motion on the floor and amended to amend this. And I made the original motion at this time. I would.
Why don't we
withdraw
do
that.
this? Can we just withdraw the motion and start over again? I've
But I
kinda
just
lost
said I
track.
would withdraw the motion.
Okay, all right. What's that? Motion is GovsRec. $75 million WWNRT. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Next item is, I'm sorry, was there somebody? Oh, thank you. Are there any no's? Motion is adopted. Anyway, what happens is just, I'm just like Representative Schwartz. I take 5 minutes off and you have to retrain me. I love you, Andy. You're a good man. All right, so is there, so that gets us through the, what we call the above the line, no? Oh, excuse me, thank you. Two more. One more. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this one is highlighted because originally it was below the line in the.
Oh, okay, that's
December's.
the two highlights there. It doesn't take a
Correct.
lot to confuse me, the two highlights there. That's fine. I got it now. So we're on 1-6, Destination Defining Development Program. Motion is GovsRec.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Representative Walton.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would encourage a no vote on the Destination Defining Development Program.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. All right, motion is failed. So now down below on this list, we had two other items that came up in our discussions yesterday and this morning on PWMTF savings. There is no GovsRec. Is there a motion with respect to permanent trust fund savings? Yes, Mr. Vice President.
Funding to the corpus of the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund for $75 million.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. The next item also with came in discussions was a contribution to the common school permanent savings. Is there any motions with respect to the?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Representative Kenner.
I would move that we make a contribution to that fund in the amount of $75 million.
Second.
And this is to the corpus?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Any discussion?
Discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a little discussion, and when we look at the differential between the two funds where the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund derives a higher rate of return based on the Common School Land Fund, I just wonder, maybe we shouldn't think about that as we move forward, that there's a higher earning potential in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund than there is in the Common School Land Fund, just nature of some of the investments, but just food for thought, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
That's clearly intentional by them. And the purpose is there's a greater cash flow need from that fund. But obviously, the larger we can make the fund so that those cash flow needs are covered, we can do exactly that. And so I'd love to get there if there's a way to do it, or find another source to make sure we cover the reduction in cash flow that, the school side obligates us to. But we definitely need to look at it, consider it, and that's kind of an ongoing cap spend discussion.
Well,
Yeah,
Mr.
and
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the only reason I bring that up is because, so if we talk about school finance and where we're at, we're already flowing money out of the general fund side and numerous areas into the school foundation program. And so it's just something to think about, that if that money's going to flow, even though it's coming from the general fund side, wouldn't we want to consider putting more money into there to generate a higher rate of return? If they were completely bifurcated, it makes sense, but they're not. And so where do you get your biggest return on your investment to go ahead and fund the schools would be back to the PMPF. But that's a discussion, Mr. Chairman, for another day, but just as food for thought.
okay, thank you, Senator Kinski. All right, well, it's funny you should say that. I think there's some things we're working on that may help with that, but that's a discussion for
That's the
another day.
endowment model, and that's taking our reserve funds and putting all of it into one or a larger pot and doing exactly that. The bill is coming.
We're working on it.
So, question having been called, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Walters.
Mr. Chairman, just looking at our screen, making sure that we had the motion correct on the PMTF. I see it says 100 million adopted. I believe that was 75 million, just for clarity.
I assure you that was just a staff, I just haven't caught up with this yet.
That's,
Got my telemetry on that. So.
Yeah, the guest news about all this is we get to have the same discussion in a month and a half, don't we? So with my guess is significantly different numbers in different categories. So we get to do this again. So anything else on above the line, anything else on which is what we've referred to as the conserved ARPA funds. All right, let's move to the below the line, which are the direct ARPA funds. First item for consideration is for those if anybody's following on this, it's housing trust investment motion for how it was. Anyway, with respect to that, motion is GovsRac.
Mr.
Representative
Chairman,
Walters.
I would encourage a no vote.
All right, fair enough. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. So an unenthusiastic no, but no nevertheless. Motion is failed. Next item refers to these, and for anybody's out there, when you see when we say 2-1, that's referring to the page of the governor's letter. It's number 17. So next item is 2-1, outdoor rec product and grant program. Motion is GovsRac. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion is adopted. The next item is on page 2-2 is BRC, which is Business Ready Communities Gap Funding. Motion is GovsRac. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Next item, also on page 2-2 is ARPA Workforce Programs. The motion is GovsRac. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next item is on page 2-2, Connect Wyoming 2. The motion is GovsRac. Is there a motion? Are there any comments on this?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
I'd like to offer a motion that is a footnote language that says for every dollar the state puts in, the private providers will match. So a 1-to-1 match of this 15 million from the private sector.
Okay, okay, so there's okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, it's not every dime the state puts in, it's this 15 million. It will be matched. Right. And I just just for clarification, I believe there's 25, this is the 80-20 match, or the 25-75 match for the infrastructure dollars for WiLink, I'm sorry, broadband. There's already 10 million funds available in a particular account. So this is just bringing that up to 25 million so we can take advantage of those infrastructure matching dollars. So what we're saying is that, and it can come from any source, but we want another $15 million from industry, from whomever, or from the beneficiaries to match these dollars in order to get more out bang for the buck of these available dollars.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the one-to-one match only pertains to the 15.
Correct.
Not the entire 25% match.
Correct.
10 million, okay.
So if I can ask a question about the motion. My recollection is, I've forgotten, it seemed to me that there was like 27 million left in this account. Is that right? Left it, not in this account, but that we've appropriated for broadband previously. And that it seems to me that there's there's a significant number that's been unexpended from the last biennium. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there's $10 million available.
$10 million. And so my question, Representative Walters, when we talk about this 15, are we also talking about that unexpended 10?
Mr. Chairman, we are not. It would just be to match this 15 with the real intention to be able to preserve that 10 that is there. Because that, if we're looking for $100 million, say, and we need 25% match, that means a total of 25. So then if we could get 12.5 from the state of this 15, which would be a little savings, and 12.5 from the private side, then that makes 25 to match to get the 75. That would be the goal. So it really is about preserving the 10 that's there and it's worth a shot.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
well, help me walk through the math here. So we're trying to find the 25 million match, correct? That's the objective. But if we take 15 million and you require a one-to-one match, that's $30 million. And then you also still have $10 million. So that would make, under that scenario, that we'd have 40 million available for match for the 75 million federal. So is my math off that just the one-to-one brings it up to 30 million? And then we still have the other 10 million available. So is that what we're talking about doing?
I would just make a friendly amendment. I would say that we want to match 10 million of the 15. And we would include of that match could be in kind or services.
So what's a 0.75 match on the 15 do? I don't have my calculator with me. Rather than trying.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's friendly to start with, but to the first question, is under that first off, there's an assumption that the 10 that's in there would be used for this match, and that is not a guarantee. That 10 could stay and just go do something else with that 10. So, but to the first part of the first question, if there's 15 here that gets matched one-to-one, that you are correct, that would be 30. And so then you would get 30 times, it would be 120 that you would get back, because that would be 25%. You would be able to go out and get 75% more. So it would, if there was a full matching of the 15, it would bring more federal dollars back to the state of Wyoming. If there's only a match of 10 of it, then only 10 of the 15 gets expended for 20, which means only 80 would be expended on broadband projects via this vehicle in the state of Wyoming. So the real crux is the 10 that's in the account only gets added in, maybe. It's not a guarantee that it gets added in. And then the one-to-one on this 15, it's at whatever level that gets matched. And so if it does get matched fully, that is 30 million. And yes, that would actually be a net positive to the state of Wyoming, because we would bring more money back to the state of Wyoming from our federal partners. So in my purpose of this this amendment is really to try and bring more money back to the state of Wyoming without expending more state of Wyoming dollars to get it there.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate that explanation, but I would ask, and I like that idea, by the way. I think it's a good idea, but what I would ask is, Dawn, is there, if this is the intent, is there any way that we can go back and put that same requirement on that 10 million that's currently in that account before that could be expended, that it would require a 1-to-1 non-federal match also?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be, I think that would be difficult because that appropriation was not in a prior budget bill, but was a prior standalone bill. So we would have to go in and modify existing statute for the period of budget. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be I can't think of a way to do it.
So
immediately.
what you're saying is there's a chance.
We get that.
And the reason I say that is because as we know, there's a significant amount of broadband running around. So there's 109 direct allocation in ARPA. We've got this, which is really for, I think is required for some matching things as been described. My understanding is that our anticipation is that when the federal government starts to come out with infrastructure, there is, I think, 100 million a year for internet over 5 years that's coming this direction. So there is a significant amount of broadband either in the pipeline or soon on its way. And I also believe, and the other reason I say that is I think there's 2 to 3 bills that'll do with broadband, which my guess was that will be broad enough that you can bring in the prior language and make those amendments to those bills. So that's why I say I think there's a chance. So anyway.
You make a note of that, Dawn?
So. And so, yeah, it was not a friendly amendment. So we'll take up the co-chairman's amendment in just a moment. So on the original amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Mr. Co-chair, do you have another amendment? Okay.
Did your second?
Okay. All right. So there we go. So now we're still on page 2-3. Health and Human Services Staffing Stabilization.
We didn't vote on the 15 as amended.
Oh, I thought the motion, that was just a footnote, wasn't it? Okay, as amended, thank you. And Connect Wyoming 2 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item we have is 2-3 Health and Human Services Staffing Stabilization. The motion is Guzrek. Are there any amendments?
Just a minute.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The next item is Health and Human Services Capital Construction Account, which is on page 2-4 of the governor's letter. Motion is Guzrek. Are there any amendments? Yeah.
I move, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we add an additional $10 million to the GovsRec.
We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any discussion?
Do you want to take a break?
You want time out? It's okay.
Oh, this is, okay. yeah.
I think we just moved to
55.
their position, didn't we?
You might want number 5.
We just moved to your position.
So would it be a friendly amendment to raise it to 55?
Sure.
Okay. So move.
Second. Hey, wait, that's my motion.
So it was a friendly amendment. There we go. All right, we know it's the amendment as amended. On the amendment, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd offer a footnote here that caps the per project at 5 million per project. No less than a 1-to-1 match.
Are in-kinds an acceptable match in this one too?
Yes.
Representative Walters?
Any source, 1-to-1, any source.
Any source, okay. Are there any, Don, do
So
you
do
need any further?
We didn't talk about who's going to administer this. If we have a choice, or what, how would it happen?
Slib.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see it administered like the CARES Act money was. Applications are submitted and evaluated.
To the SBC or to SLIB or to who?
WBC and did the CARES.
Don?
Slip.
I think WBC administered and SLIB made the final decision. I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Who would it be by default?
Go ahead, Don.
Mr. Chairman, you did have two different entities distributing the CARES Act money, but the capital construction was by application limitedly, and it went to SLIB, correct?
Okay, so I presume that's what would happen.
Mr. Co-Chair, we do have a governor's representative in here. Kevin, do you have any, from the governor's office, do they have a preference where this program would be administered from?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of a preference.
Okay, thanks for that help.
So, Mr. Chairman, so then it's the State Loan and Investment Board would be the administering agency.
So it would be through OLSI and the state board would do that? If we get this wrong, I'm sure we'll hear from the governor's office and we can fix this during session. So is that the plan? Is that the motion?
Can you recap the motion?
Chairman, I'll recap the motion.
Go ahead.
A cap or a limit of $5 million per project. No less than a 1-to-1 match from any source, including in-kind. Not sure what the in-kind would be, and administered through the State Loan and Investment Board.
Okay, do we understand the motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Just some
Representative.
discussion. I don't know that we need the in-kind contribution because it's hard to keep track of and difficult to administer and subject to manipulation.
Mr. Chairman, and the reason I think that would be important is, when you think of the large hospitals and stuff like that, but these funds would be available for these little rural healthcare clinics around the state of Wyoming too. And I would hate to put a requirement on where they may already have significant level of obligated funding for staff and other things that they could show as a match. So for me, the in-kind thing is more about giving the little bitty guys, those little rural healthcare districts and stuff, an opportunity to maybe come in and do that. Now, I'm not saying that they would, but scale down from a big facility down to a little bitty facility. And that's the reason that I'd like to leave that in here. Now, certainly SLIB can write rules on, or guidelines, I would say, on, what's eligible for in-kind. I just would like to see that left in there for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
well, I think there's in at least one or more of these programs, there already is a set of guidelines where essentially it's means tested. It's a sliding fee scale, and some communities don't have 2 nickels to rub together, and it's 100%. And then it scales up to a max of 1-to-1. I wonder if we don't want to take a look at that, because I agree that there are some communities that just really are not going to be able to come up any match at all.
So, Mr. Chairman, so if I can just go to Kevin for a question on this that I think may help guide us in this discussion. And Kevin, my recollection was that when you lose these direct ARPA funds, it's not, you can't just go build whatever you want to go build. It was limited pretty specifically to several things. As existing structures, HVAC types of things with, increased filtration and circulation, things like that. It was related to ICUs, emergency rooms, and may have been one other one, but I mean, so ultimately, no one can take this money and go build a new facility. It's just not, it's not going to happen. So go, Kevin, do you have anything else what else do you have that may help us with this?
You have a good understanding. That was represented today by Clifton Larson now.
Okay. And so I think that's the idea of in kind is ultimately some of these folks have already, and I can think of one there's been a number of people who have talked to all of us about these projects. For an example, one of them who talked to me said that they've already expended $15 million building a facility, and they're trying to get some grant money they're trying to get some of this money to help them buy equipment to fill out their emergency room. So do they have to come up and so the question is, they may not, they've already put 15 million in, can they get some additional money to help them buy equipment? Or with this, would they have to go out, and if they got a 2.5 million grant, they'd have to go get another 2.5 million to spend the 5? Yeah, so that's the clarification we're trying to get to.
And I think the answer would be yes. But that's simple. But it also allows that equipment as part of, can be within these facilities. So, I mean, we're trying to stretch the dollars as far as we can.
Okay. All right, do we understand the motion? Are we ready?
Kind of match for the one-to-one.
Mr. Chairman, I think since it's my motion, I'm going to withdraw the in-kind portion of that motion and just say that's the cap of $5 million and the one-to-one match administered through SLIB. We can bring up the in-kind subject as a separate motion if that's amenable. So that's what the motion is,
Yeah.
without the in-kind.
And we may know some more and be able to refine this as we go through the process.
Mr. Chair,
Same concept. I think what we could do is at some point, we could come up with an amendment to this that gives certain authority to SLIB on a needs test basis if they need to do that. So,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so we're on here. Why wouldn't we just do that now?
because it's your motion.
Okay, you ready for the question? Go ahead, Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question because I've heard two words used, project and facility. And I'm not sure I'm fairly confident they're not identical because a particular facility could have multiple projects. Clarification?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if the project is large enough, it could have several facilities.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, all the more reason for the clarification.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, we'll leave that to the SLIB to decide if it's multiple applications for the same unit or what they're up to, and they'll be able to ferret all that out.
And I'm sure that when this goes out, I know that there's numerous interested communities around the state. I'm sure we'll hear from our colleagues when this goes out to the floor. So,
Mr. Chairman,
committee, go ahead.
I'll vote for this now as is, but I would ask, I don't know who the appropriate is, whether it's Kevin or Don or somebody at the SLIB board to get us that language that's been used previously on these projects so that whatever we do, it's consistent with what SLIB has previously done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we further allow SLIB to consider in-kind contributions for the one-to-one match.
Second.
Okay.
So friendly amendment in kind or a needs-based component?
Needs-based.
Yeah.
Define that.
Well, a small clinic that doesn't have an in-kind.
Okay, yep, yep. That'd be a friendly amendment.
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, just a question for Senator Hicks on what that includes. Does it include, the services of the staff of the local agency, getting
So
together for
here-
meetings and they get together for meetings for 4 hours and they value their time at $200 an hour. So that counts as,
Here's where I can potentially see
$2,000.
this would come into play is you got a rural health clinic that already has a maintenance person that's already on the payroll staff. And then all of a sudden they need to do something with their HVAC. They could get the materials through SLIB and then do the installation themselves. If they've got those folks available, that would be an in-kind service. And on a scenario like that, and it may very well be an emergency center, that they can get volunteer labor at those local levels to help put up an emergency receiving system. So my point is I don't know that it'll ever be used, but I would certainly hate to exclude an opportunity for those little guys to be able to participate in the program without that language in there.
Okay, we're on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
no,
Let's do show of hands. Division. All those in favor say aye. 6, 7. Those opposed, no. Motion has carried. We'll probably get to talk about that again. So anyway, so now as amended on the Health and Human Services Capital Construction Account, is there any other motions? So as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next one is the telehealth investment account. Motion is GovsRec. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next one is page 2-4, Health and Human Services Innovation Fund.
Mr. Chairman,
Motion is GovsRec. Go ahead.
I would move to amend GovsRec to $5 million.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next one is the 2-5 Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988 implementation. The motion is GovsRec. All those in favor say aye. All those
Mr. Chairman.
opposed, no.
no. Mr. Chairman,
Oh, sure. Go ahead,
just some
Representative.
discussion on this. I'm voting no on this, but it's not because I or anyone else in this committee doesn't want to prevent suicide. It's rather that we think the program as designed and as presented might not be cost effective.
Well, and we had some discussion in this in our as well. I mean, when we went to suicide prevention hotline a few years ago, it was represented as $1 million, and they thought that this would not be, it would, they'd figure out how to do this and it wouldn't be forthcoming. And so now it's 7 million and to move it along and it will be an orphan at the end of the time. And it's a tough question, but yeah, I think that we're all in the same place. So thank you for that, Representative Stead. So motion is GovsRec. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The motion has failed. Next item is EMS dispatch certification. Motion is GovsRec. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next one, also on page 2-5 is the Wyoming Resource Center Network. The motion is GovsRec. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next one is yeah, we were gonna check and see if we thought that was available. So the next one is one-time, as the 2-6, one-time planning for crisis beds. Excuse me, I'm sorry, 211. Thank you. Governor's letter, page 2-6, 211 capacity building resource and referral. The motion is GovsRec. Yes, go ahead.
Amend to 1.75 million.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion the GovRec as amended is adopted.
That was just on the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
But I think the amendment was the amendment was modified the GovRec to 1.75. And Don, we need to, we're okay? Okay. I'm getting the frown and the nod, so that means yes. Next one is also on page, Governor's Letter, page 2-6, one-time funding for crisis bed stabilization services.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Representative Stith.
just a point of order. I believe this was already approved in the budget that we adopted for the Department of Family Services, so I don't think we have to vote on this, do we?
Mr. Chairman, they've got that as an exception request with the direction that it come out of ARPA funds.
So
Did we already address this in the budget? So is this essentially adopted in the budget, so we just vote no here?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you did adopt $1 million effective immediate for crisis beds in the DFS budget. If you wanted to add to that, you could certainly do so.
All right. So,
So, Mr. Chairman, to clarify, if we say yes to this, we're bumping it to $2 million?
and that would, but this 1 million would not be available until after would be in the next fiscal year, or the first fiscal year of this budget. Is that right, Don?
I don't think so.
Mr. Chairman, let me look.
Yeah, please do.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the ask by the department was for 1 million effective immediate. I didn't think they were looking for $1 million now and $1 million later. I could be wrong, Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the request was $1 million for effective immediate. But then there was a conversation about how much they needed. I think that the director said that they didn't need the full million. I can't remember exactly.
Mr. Chairman.
So I think you did approve $750,000 in the budget, effective
Okay.
immediate.
All right, so,
Mr. Chairman.
okay, so let's just restate that. We did deal with and authorize $750,000 of direct ARPA effective immediately in the budget. So that's what we've done so far. So so we've got this. So we need to resolve this, either reduce this by 750 and ensure that that's, or I would assume, or do we just deny this because we've already approved it in the budget? Would that, how would we do this? If we didn't want to add any more, Don, how would we do that?
Mr. Chairman, I would reduce this item to 0,
Okay.
or you
And
could
if-
vote no on the,
Or vote no on GovRec. And so if we want to add money, then we need then the GovRec as amended, the GovRec would be simply to add another $1 million. So there'd be 750 immediate and another $1 million that would be available in the first, be available in the next biennium. So go ahead, Representative Larson.
So we had two priorities, I think, in there. Well, no, priority number 6. And I'm just wanting to track that because in that, the governor recommended funding that with ARPA and denied the general fund request. And then my understanding that we then give authority for 750 of that general fund or ARPA immediate.
Mr. Chairman, effective immediate ARPA direct. And I apologize, it was 750,000, not 1 million.
750. So, Mr. Chairman, if we adopted that, then I would suggest that we just make this one 250,000
Mr. Chairman,
to finish out the $1 million.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, go ahead.
the reason we reduced it to 750 in committee is she said she didn't need the full million.
That is correct.
We made that reduction with her assent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's correct. I forgot that. Thank you.
Are you withdrawing your motion?
I am withdrawing my motion.
All right, so we are on GovRec. Representative Walters, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On one-time crisis bed funding stabilization, I would encourage a no vote.
Okay, thank you, because it's already in the budget. All right, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next one is also on page 2-6. Health Education Fund. Motion is Govzerac. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Next one is on page 2-7, mental health first aid training. The motion is Govzerac. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. The next item is EMS Stabilization Fund. The Motion for 10 million, the motion for the Govzerac is, the motion is Govzerac.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Kinsler.
I've got some rather cryptic notes here that say 10/10, and I know you had something in mind. I just can't recall what it was.
Well, when we went back and discussed, Direct ARPA is a significant paradigm change for the Appropriations Committee. And for those of us who have been, we have been oftentimes accused of being miserly and heartless for some of the cuts that we make, and Direct ARPA requires expenditure in restricted categories for various purposes, and it's intended to be distributed and spent, and we're trying to do the best we can, and we struggle with that a little bit. So with that, the testimony I remember was that we had significant testimony about EMS and some of the struggles that we're having with EMS and transitioning and figuring out how we're going to do that. And so our EMS services around the state, particularly in some rural areas, are on the verge of collapse. And so with that, that's a long-winded way of saying that we need to support this. And so so right now it's up to 10 million, and we would think we should support this in some amount. So
Mr.
with
Chairman,
that, go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
I will make a motion that we further amend the governor's recommendation and reduce that by 5 million.
So the EMS Stabilization Fund is 5 million, and that's just a stabilization. We'll deal with regionalization in a moment.
That would just be for the stabilization.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
is there a second? Yeah, we got a motion and a second. Senator Kinski.
Well, I was hoping, and I thought in our discussions, the regionalization pilot, that the stabilization would be limited to the regionalization pilot, because there'll be a lot of disruption when they regionalize. There's an article at some national magazine not too long ago, 14 rural ambulance services have closed. And I think regionalization is probably going to be the great salvation, but people don't have much. It's hard to get people to abandon each individual fiefdom. And I think if the stabilization fund is limited to those that are in this regionalization, it may give them incentive. That's my thought, would be to footnote keep the stabilization at 10 million.
So my recollection, though, is when we talked about that, is, Kevin, is that 10 million is for the pilot program and does not provide assistance for other places that are excluded or not in the pilot program initially. Yeah, that's what I remember. But does anybody remember that? Well, let's go to the committee first. Anybody remember that differently? Representative Stitt.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think you stated that accurately, that the pilot program is going to be limited to 1 or 2 counties, I think.
And Mr. Chairman, I think we need to keep these bifurcated and fund each one of them separately. So
Okay.
Mr.
my
Chairman,
motion would just deal with the stabilization account at this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, were you asking Kevin whether the stabilization fund was limited to those participating in the regional pilot program?
No, I was confirming that the
Okay.
regional pilot program dollars
It's separate.
won't be available to others who are not involved in the pilot program.
Okay.
So with that, go ahead, Representative Larson.
so Mr. Chairman, I think the conversation that we're having now fits well into the conversation that the House had on this, and that is looking at EMS services and the stabilization statewide. Not everybody's thinking regionalization is important to other areas. My part of the world thinks it might be a really important thing. And so then how do we implement this statewide? In our thought was to deny that, and then down at the very bottom on that local government support projects, that then we could allow those communities to come in, and if there's 2 counties that want to do a regional thing, they could make an application like the MRG funding, or if they need a stabilization, they could make that. But it would kind of be more regionalized or localized and not trying to, we was just trying to consolidate that effort down into that lower one. So I would just, that was our rationale for not supporting it up above. We think that it has merit, but was making the same process available down below.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. I'd say both. I think there's some folks that are ready to go. I think there's some stabilization, some EMS services teetering on the verge of bankruptcy. This program would be administered by the WDH. They could swing into action immediately, whereas the one down below is going to be an application process, which could take quite some period of time. But if WDH is able to stand up a successful regionalization pilot, then there may be applications from other regions to regionalize that could go to that larger fund down below. So I'm saying let's do both.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would agree with Senator Kensky on that because I think we do have ambulance is a problem. It's just the private sector. It's a bad business where you have low volume. And so we need to, I think we need to do both. You can see this program either working and being really good, or you can see it being a waste of money. Okay. If we just throw money away to prop up a bad business for a couple of years, that's a bad use of the funds. But if, for example, the stabilization fund were used to help an area transition from, say, a private provider to, say, a hospital, and the hospital wanted to take it over, or a fire department wanted to take over the service, and they could use that fund for the one-time costs of, say, acquiring ambulances, for example, then that would be a good use of the stabilization fund that would be available across the whole state without having to wait for 3 or 4 years to find out whether the pilot program worked. So
Well, and
I support
I
the
think that's one of the reasons why it's 5 million is, quite frankly, it's at half. And in both of our bodies, we've come back and we've significantly tried to cut back on both conserved ARPA and direct ARPA, recognizing that the best ideas and how this works comes forward, so that we'll be here in a year talking about a lot of the same things, getting reports on where these things have had. And I think that's the idea behind funding half, is that that's enough to provide some money for stabilization and give some people some time to work this out, but not necessarily propping it up for a full 2 years. That's kind of the thought process.
So, Mr.
But you know, we're just trying to figure out how to make sure that the intent of this is accomplished. And if I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. I think that's clear, and we're not necessarily wedded to this. We're just want to make sure that there's money allocated for this purpose.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Well, I think, if I understand correctly, I think what Representative Stith is suggesting is a footnote on the stabilization that limits it to aid of the regionalization, the pilot regionalizations. In other words, he doesn't want to see a company that's just not being run very well come in and say, oh, I'm a rural ambulance and I need some extra money, and extend their otherwise inevitable collapse, as opposed to somebody that says, look, we're pulling 3 counties together and we need some money for this, that, and the other, is where I think he was heading.
I appreciate that. I'm not very good on subtleties. Is that what you're trying to do, Representative Stith?
Mr. Chairman, that is the gist of it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my concern is where a program needs stabilization, but not regionalization.
And that's why we're keeping them separate. But what I believe Representative Stith is trying to say is, we don't want this to just be, for lack of a better reason, PPP for ambulance services.
Okay.
It's to help the Department of Health is going to have to make some determination and possibly some hard choices to make sure the point is to give some time to these things to go to where they can be successful, as opposed to just provide subsistence payments.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So let me see if I can give you a real world example of this. When you have a EMS service that for very small communities, let's say Platte Valley, Elk Mountain, Hannah, for example, and you have I-80 running through there, and you have these large accidents all over the place. It literally strains these little EMS units to the point where people don't work there anymore. And so we lost EMS services because It is a constant out on the interstate all the time, and they can't recruit people to do that. So consequently, when we do have a significant traffic incident, they're coming out of Laramie for emergency services that are right there by Hannah, Elk Mountain, and Walcott Junction on the interstate. And so I think this would help at least give those an opportunity to provide those services with maybe some financial support to do that. But that's the scenario that we've ran into in Carbon County, where literally, and they can't just support the infrastructure, the vehicles, the fuel, the time, the reimbursement for the EMTs, and then just the workload. So I think that's part of the intent of the stabilization fund, is to try to do something in the short term and then encourage a regionalization in the long term. So maybe 5 million's not as too much, but I do think we need something in the short term to allow some assistance for, I just tell you, it's a big demand when you got a very small pool of EMTs out there on that section of the interstate.
You call for, you dial your 911 on your cell phone and it's an hour before anybody shows up. It's pretty disheartening. So
It is pretty disheartening.
So.
go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
I think we want to take a quick break, and we want to meet a little bit.
Sure, fair enough. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll stand at ease and sound of the gavel. Uh-oh.
There it is. There it is.
Wave, Mark, you're on TV. I'm just waiting for, there we go. Thank you. So JC's back in order. We are, well, at least as ordered as we can be. Where did we leave off? We were on 2-7 EMS stabilization fund. The motion was 5 million stabilization fund with a footnote that the Wyoming Department of Health expends the money to assist in how do you want to word that, Representative? Do you have any particular ideas? You want to word it in the negative or the positive?
Your choice, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, basically all we want to do is put a prohibition and not be used to prolong flawed business models for EMS services, something along those lines. And if we'll give you literary license, if you want to state that in the positive in some direction, or if you want to leave it in the negative, we'll give you literary license when we come back, prove that. Okay. All right. We're ready for the motion? And the motion is to, I believe, also reduces the Gov's rec by $5 million to $5 million. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. On the EMS regionalization pilot, motion is Gov's rec.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would further move to amend the gov rec and reduce that by $5 million and add a footnote that requires a 1-to-1 matching dollars.
Discussion? Heard the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So back on, and that is the motion. Or do we need to, you want to do it as amended? I think that is the motion. All right, thank you. So now we're on page 2-8, food as medicine, food insecurity. The motion is Gov's rec. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has failed. Next one also on page 2-8 is food as medicine project well pilot. The motion is Gov's rec. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no.
No.
Motion fails. Also on page 2-8, Department of Correction Substance Use Disorder Treatment Backlog. The motion is Gov's rec. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Also on page 2-9 of Governor's Letter 17, Family Medicine Residency Program, Cheyenne and Casper. Motion is Gov's rec. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Also on page 2-9, Fund to access critical technology needs for RIS and Wild Lake. Motion is Gov's rec.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Kinski.
I would further move to amend Governor's rec to strike RIS.
RIS or?
RISOR, yeah.
Okay, is there a second? Motion seconded. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So then with removing that, then it just says for wildlife.
That's correct.
I just make sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. Go ahead, Don.
Mr. Chairman, the dollar amount has not been changed, so it's still 35 million.
That's correct. That's correct. Next one, also Governor, it's also on page 2-9 of Governor's Letter. Safety Net Food Network Evaluation / National Meeting. Motion is Gov's rec. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion has failed. On page 210 of Governor's Letter 17, local government support projects. Anyway, that's the motion. Motion is Gov's rec. Is there any changes? All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Nobody said anything. We gave you the pregnant pause.
We're on local government support, correct?
Yeah. What's
Local
that?
government support, correct?
Yes, we're on governmental
Yes.
support. Gov's rec is $50 million.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd offer a footnote
Okay,
that simply says sewer and water projects would hold a lower priority than other infrastructure projects.
little explanation on that one.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have other legislation.
So we'll take Senator Larson finger move as the second. So go ahead.
And my vocal expression.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Thank you,
hear-
Mr. Chairman. The thought behind this is, in other legislation where that's proposed, there's going to be about $95 million directly for water and sewer projects. And we would really like to make sure that this does not become a water projects 2 type of an account. We would like to make sure that counties and local municipalities and local entities have opportunity to spend this on other activities and encourage those other needs within communities other than just more water type projects. That's our hope.
I have a question for you. I thought in discussions, one of the reasons for this was to provide the opportunity for local governments to have matches for other projects. And so anyway, I'm just wondering if that's a little too limiting, but that's a question, it's not an accusation or anything else.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's why I used the language would just hold a lower priority. So the water projects would still be eligible, but it's simply to encourage other types of projects out of this account as the first type of priorities, you might say. But it shouldn't be limiting because we did have vigorous discussion. Should we say no sewer and water projects could be funded through this? And we said, no, we want to leave that open to the locals to decide. However, we do want to try and encourage other types of projects as opposed to this being seen as just one other way to get these done. It doesn't limit them. It just adds a soft ranking.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
So if we include that, then my guess that we're looking at actually going to put money into the water and sewer program, the 95 million, and that number is just out there. Now that's in a bill form. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics. Can we go ahead and put that money into the ARPA bill now for those type of projects? And if that's the case, then do we need the bill? Don?
Mr. Chairman, if you so desire, upon motion, you could move that entire bill into the bill that you're currently developing.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we were so inclined to do so, I would footnote this and say, none of this money is available for water and sewer projects because there would already be another account already set up for direct ARPA. So I guess, so I'm at the horse and the cart, which one comes first here? Or is this a conceptual thing that we just need to do that
So,
now?
Mr. Coach, I think the other way to do that is that we could just put, in the event that that bill passes, then these funds will be for non-water projects. And that way it covers both bases and we don't have to stick the whole thing in there.
Chairman Solomon, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Second most friendly today. You had a real friendly one earlier.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Before you do that, Senator Hicks, did you have something else? No, okay. Senator Guru.
Just a question, even though I understand it's a friendly amendment, but I'd just like to hear from Don and or Kevin. Would that in any way jeopardize this as far as how the federal government would look at this as ARPA funds, since water projects are kind of a key element of that? I mean, could they say at a later, different time that something is wrong with doing it that way by excluding them? I just ask. Okay.
There was a negative head nod as I interpreted that.
Fair.
Okay. Head shake, I guess. There was a head nod, affirmative as. Okay. All right. It's been along 4 weeks, even though it was divided. Fair enough. Thank you. So we're on the motion as friendly amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. And so and then we encompass the amount on that so that we've completed that. We don't have to go back and as amended, do we?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you've addressed all individual items in the governor's letter number 17.
Oh,
You do have the Supreme Court's letter and you have some individual, the Supreme Court letter.
Did you have those listed down below? There we are. So this is off of the judicial branch letters. So judicial branch ARPA request number 1 was Circuit Court e-filing. The motion is the Chief Justice's rec. Any discussion?
Request number 1.
Request-
Chief's recommendation.
Chief's recommendation is the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The next one is Chief Justice request number 2, temporary time limited transfers, which was 3 AWACS. Motion is Chief's rec.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion, or I would move to reduce that number by half. And I'm not going to do the math here in public.
Okay,
Second.
and that's what we love about Don Richards is he's not afraid to do math in public. So, and then we've got a motion and a second discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Third item is request number 3, courthouse, Chief Justice request number 3, courthouse security. Motion is Chief Justice's rec. All those in, is there any discussion or motions with respect to this other than Chief Justice's rec?
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage a no vote.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion has failed. Chief Justice request number 4 is data sharing interface. The motion is Chief Justice's rec. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Next, motion has failed. Chief Justice's request number 5 is a position shortage of 3 AWACS. So again, the motion is the Chief Justice's rec. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion fails. Last item is Chief Justice's request number 6, protective PPE and tests. Motion is Chief Justice's rec.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to reduce that amount to $150,000.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is as amended, as amended, as
Mr. Chairman?
approved, adopted.
That's one time direct, right?
Yes. We didn't say that. Let's go back and do that one more time. So I think that, was that, so
I think that's just a.
Representative, I think that was incumbent in your motion,
That it's one time in ARPA Direct?
one-time ARPA direct. All right.
Correct.
So yes, go ahead, Representative Smith.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. We may have voted on this and I didn't realize it, but we've approved the request number 1, the Circuit Court e-filing for the Supreme Court, but there was also a separate request for e-filing for the Supreme Court. Was that already in the budget that we approved?
That's already, we approved that in the budget. It was an exception request
Okay.
approved in the budget, if I remember. Is that correct, Don? Okay.
He's got a question.
Yes, Don.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's clear to staff that request number 1 and 6, which were both approved, are both out of ARPA Direct. They're both one time. Request number 2, there is some disagreement. The judiciary has submitted materials for your consideration that indicates that this priority is ARPA eligible. And in CLA's review, they have concluded otherwise.
And
And
it's not ARPA,
I'm sorry?
that it's not ARPA eligible. It would be conserved funds.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We just need some direction as to which fund source you would like for request number 2.
So,
Was-
Mr.
Was it
Chairman,
gray? Was it yellow versus black and white?
Mr. Chairman, are you asking us to give an opinion about whether we think the Supreme Court's wrong in its legal conclusions?
You know, turnabout's fair play, Reverend Steph. I'm kind of enchanted with that one.
Mr. Chairman, I
Go
think
ahead.
the intent was ARPA direct. The hope, maybe not intent, the hope.
And so with that, I would just make the motion that the one we have, that if it's not, so let me ask you this. Well, I'll just make the motion would that be, that it be at direct? If it's not eligible, it would swap it back to conserved ARPA. Is that friendly? Is that acceptable to the
Well, the
body?
definition of if it's not eligible, if we're notified by the Treasury that it's not eligible.
Let them sue.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, fair enough. All those in favor say aye. Suppose no. What's that? Yeah, they should have some attorneys in the Supreme Court. All right, is there any other items on the Supreme Court? My recollection was that there were 2 additional items, but those have not been officially made at this point in time. So I think we've concluded with the Chief Justice's letter. Is that your understanding?
Mr. Chairman, that is.
Okay. Are there any other items that we have not covered today that you know about? Don?
Mr. Chairman, a handful of items. If you would go back up to the top table, the conserved general funds. Would you like to include those as a separate bill, or would you like staff to incorporate them in the budget?
Our preference, the Senate's preference would be a separate bill.
Our preference is in this, the other. So we'll answer that tomorrow.
Next, Mr. Chairman, there is a bill pending before you after this discussion, but that same language could be incorporated into the ARPA bill as well, which I assume is section 2 plus the judicials.
That's probably a better place for it. in this.
Well, and so
Or
we'll have
both.
an ARPA bill. The question
No,
is,
no, no.
we'll have an ARPA bill because the direct ARPA bill we separate. The question is only whether or not the above the line, the conserved ARPA is in the budget or not in the budget. So there will be an ARPA bill.
But the question is, should we put this bill separately or in the ARPA?
I would like to put it in the ARPA bill. But I'd like to go ahead and work the bill so we know what we're going to put in the ARPA bill if that's, I don't think it'll take
So
us very long.
We have one more item
Oh, okay.
on there.
All right. And so if Don, if we've completed your checklist, and that's, I was just going to throw it back to members of the committee. Are there any other items that they wish to discuss with respect to our discussion about ARPA today?
So,
Representative Walters, haven't heard from you all day. What's going on? What have you got for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back up, still in the below the line ARPA direct on the Connect Wyoming 2, I would move to add $10 million effective immediate.
So you want to, so if I understand, is there a second?
second.
Thank you. So if I understand your motion, what you would do is being increased. Fine, there we are. We increase, so that we adopted the governor's rec with an amendment of the footnote. You want to increase that to 25 million?
Correct.
Correct, with only 10 of it effective immediate, and this 10 that's effective immediate would not require the match. And I'll explain the reason for that is because due to bidding and all of that, we would like to be able to get some of these projects started this summer. And if we require a match, and that's going to require rules and SLIB to figure out how to do all that, which is going to take more time than we would like to see out there. And so this would be money to get the projects rolling for this year. And then the other 15 million would be the money that required the match. Because regardless of it, it's a 25% state for 75% federal. And so if you put in 10, you get what, 40 back or 30 back. So we could get some work going this year. That's the effective immediate part. And then, as I said, the reason for not matching it is due to the time lag of getting the match rules figured out and implemented, delaying those projects for this year.
Mr. Chairman, just want to clarify that the reason the 1-to-1 is there is because the SLIB board can't act fast enough to get rules promulgated. Is that what I understood?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that they could, as additionally, they only meet quarterly. And so then depending on when this bill passes and is signed, it might be their June meeting or July meeting before they would actually take up any of these types of projects. And so if we want to do anything in this summer construction season, while the weather is good, I think it's a wise idea for us to put some money in effective immediate and just not worry about this match component
It's
that
only an
we have for the
8-week
future.
window in Danville.
Certain counties.
Mr. Chairman,
Construction season only 8 weeks in some place. Well, that's true. Go ahead, Representative, or excuse me, Senator Kinsey.
Mr. Chairman, on and against, and I do want to see everybody in Wyoming, especially rural Wyoming, and my district has a lot of rural Wyoming, have access to snappy, speedy internet. A couple of things. The 1-on-1 match is important. I think there should be some skin in the game as opposed to 100%. But second, I've asked staff for a briefing on exactly in the recent past, starting from the Meade administration forward, how much has been appropriated for broadband, how much has been spent on broadband, both state and federal monies, how much has been appropriated, but it remains unspent, and then how much is coming at us from the infrastructure bill, from this new Arpa bill, and so forth. I'd like to get an accounting. I know we've talked about that back and forth in the committee, but I don't know that we've ever actually asked to get an accounting of just how many hundreds of millions of dollars are there. And then finally, just with respect to the technology, there's some new satellite-based technology that promises to be a game changer. I'm not saying that it will. I'd just like to learn more about it before I jump in with both feet. And in the end, I may be convinced that this is really the way to go, but I'm just going to express my reservations for now until I learn more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those-
Excuse me. Withdrawn.
We'll do that again, just in case, you know.
Yeah, you get conditioned like an animal on this committee.
Yeah. So, yeah, you have the same problem Representative Schwartz and I have, so.
Yeah.
All right, let's try this again. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion, let's do a division. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed, raise your hand. The motion carries. Yes, Don.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one more item. I apologize. There's been no action or no request on any parameters for the $109 million. That is the capital facilities funds, separate and apart from the 1.068 billion. You need not take action necessarily, but all of those applications must be submitted by September 2022 to the federal government. I just wanted the committee to be aware. And also, when you mark up the bill that's before you, you may want to take that into consideration if you want to leave space for the governor to submit those applications and not remove all ability for the governor's discretion
So,
on.
Mr. Co-Chair, in one moment, I've got a motion on the 109.
So, right, so I think we've got, so that would be, so I understand that would be, if we're gonna take action, I think the only action we'd take right now is probably a footnote on the 109.
I'm gonna have a motion. Just 1 second. I got.
But your motion will be a footnote in the 109 only. Or excuse me, in the ARPA
Right,
bill.
right.
Yeah. So we've got a couple, so we're not done yet. We've got the deal with what we just did a minute on governor's authority, plus we want to do this. So we're not done yet.
And Mr. Chairman, not that you have to, but if you wanted to address the 109 this year, you may want to have us repeal the provisions that were adopted last year prior to any guidance relative to community
Okay.
college school
That's
districts.
probably a good idea. We got it going all over the place. So, okay, what I want to do is, are we done with the numbers and we move into some footnotes and some of the other things we've talked about? Go ahead, Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question about what I think of as the section 604 ARPA funds, which is $109 million for capital improvements, which is largely broadband. Is it the plan that will go into this ARPA bill, or that it will be a separate ARPA bill? It's a lot of money, so.
The discussions we've had down there on the 109 million is that when we look out there, we think that there are at least 3 bills that are coming to deal with broadband. And my hope is that one of those will deal with that. If not, because we've addressed it in here, we can certainly deal with it in here if it's not done then.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it is the case that the Blockchain Technology Committee passed out and approved a bill that does allocate all of the $109 million to broadband, and then it does some other things. I don't know if we want to use that as the vehicle. So the question is, do we want to use that bill as a vehicle for this broadband section 604 money, or whether we want a different approach?
The discussions we've had down there is we would rather wait and see what comes at us on the floor. As we talked about, there's that 109, there's now 25 here. There's still money that's been unexpended. And we think that there, if we understand the infrastructure bill, when that starts coming, that will be 100 million a year for 5 years out of the infrastructure bill into broadband. And so, and I know members on your side, there's all kinds of eagerness about broadband on your side. There's eagerness on our side about broadband. My preference would be just, we've got vehicles out there to get this done. I don't want to make those decisions now on broadband. I'd rather see what the body comes up with, and then if we have to, we can move it into these bills, this bill.
And so, Mr. Co-Chair, Kevin, remind me what the restrictions on the 109 are pretty limited, as I recall. Other than broadband, what else is available?
I'm gonna think about it. Maybe Don can help.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, there are capital construction projects that are eligible if they are multi-purpose, meaning workforce training, education, and healthcare related.
So in part, would that be, for example, the Jackson project? For community
Mr. Chairman,
college?
that's the closest thing I can think of, and there's no guarantee that that one would qualify. And this is,
That would be an application process?
it is an application process to the Department of the Treasury, and they make a final determination.
And the period to submit those applications, I mean, could we do it tomorrow if it was ready?
Mr. Chairman, I understand it is a 2-step process, actually a 3-step process. The first step was done in December, where the state indicated an intention to apply. The second step is a global, how the funds are likely to be expended. And we have not done that as a state, but I get the impression, I could be wrong, that the state's or the governor's office intention is to submit around $75 million for broadband, and the balance for community facilities, Wi-Fi, and connectivity, specifically community centers, libraries.
So would it be appropriate, Mr. Co-Chair, if we put a footnote to direct the governor in that letter to request the application for the CWC Jackson building as a component of that request?
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't, but let's ask Senator Guru, who is affects you know, it's in it's in his home district. Senator Guru, your thoughts?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As I've been trying to figure out a way to do this, to try to get this in. So all I would say at this point, and listening to everyone and trying to ferret out the research I've done, is that I don't have a problem with doing that as long as
You get it
we
done.
keep the general fund dollars exactly where they are right now. And if, and only if, we have the check in hand, deposited and spent, will we release those dollars? Would that be fair? Not that I'm nervous about
I
what the
think I
federal
know how you
government's
feel.
gonna do, but I've just been working with my friends here and I've just grown into this nervousness about the federal government.
Yeah. So, yeah, in the legislative parlance, he wants a backstop.
Yeah. We like backstops. It's all right. So I would make that motion. That we, make a footnote that it's addressed to the chief executive, that in his letter to the Treasury with regards to the 109 million, that one of the projects he asked for funding through that project is the CWC building in Teton County. With the understanding that if it's funded through that mechanism, we'll hold the appropriation in advance to make sure that if we fund it through the bill, in the Capcom bill, that if it's denied, then the funds will be available to proceed. Something of that effect.
Are you going to second that motion, Representative Guru? Okay. Don, you need any clarification, or have you got the gist? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is adopted. So, that takes care of one of the footnotes. I think the other one is just, why don't we do this in the way, this way? If we've got that bill, why don't we just go ahead and we'll work this bill?
Okay.
And then when we're done with the bill, we'll move it into we'll make a motion to move it into the bill if and that motion to pass or not pass.
So, Mr. Question, my one question I'd like to think about as we do this, in terms of the veto capability line item versus just vetoing the bill, is there a preference on where we put this?
If you put it in the Arpa bill, obviously there's multiple appropriations in the Arpa bill, and so the governor can use line item veto. In a standalone bill, he has to veto the bill. He can't line item veto. So, I mean, that's the decision we make.
It's a lot easier, I would think, to override a bill than it would be to override. Anyway, as we work this bill, I think we ought to just think about it.
Why don't we do both?
The right hand don't get you, the left hand will. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. No means no, and his pen still has a lot of ink. So we'll, all right. So Don, why don't you take us through the bill? It's pretty simple. And so go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Tamara will walk you through this.
There you are. Thank you. Hi, Tamara. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So this bill is 22 LSO 0295, working draft 1.0. And I apologize, it's appearing to you as a House bill. I didn't mean to attribute that unfairly. It was actually came about as a Senate Appropriations request. So I didn't mean to give credit for good ideas to the House. But you see there that this bill amends Senate File 118. That's 2021 Wyoming Session Laws, Chapter 166. That was passed in the last general session. And this act relates to the emergency expenses of government and really does one thing. It limits expenditure of COVID-19 relief funds and specifically of funds provided through the American Rescue Plan Act and limits that authority that was granted through the to the governor and the governor's office through Senate File 118. It specifies an end date or a sunset date for the emergency programs and authority that came with the ability to expend those funds. So most of this act is amendment within section 1 to that prior bill that is on page 2. You see that we amend the legislative findings, and the date that is throughout this entire bill for which the authority and the appropriation would lapse is March 26, 2022, which is anticipated to occur after the bill would go through the budget session, and then any time necessary if for the governor, if he chooses to sign it, or if he chooses not to sign it, for it to become act by default. So there's an amendment to the findings, then there's an amendment in section 5 of that prior act on page 2 to limit the authority to expend funds until March 26, 2022. That day is continued on page 3. Page 3, subsection B, there are amendments that come in on page 4 that limit the appropriation. This subsection appropriated all of the COVID relief funds that didn't accrue to any agency, including those from the American Rescue Plan. This bill would limit and make that appropriation lapse on March 26, 2022. You see that on page 4. Then there is a conforming change on page 5 to bring in that date. That authority allowed the governor to transfer funds that were appropriated in Senate File 118. It limits that to March 26, 2022. Section 7 on the bottom of page 5 is an amendment. This section generally clarified that nothing in Senate File 118 would limit the governor's authority to use the B11 authority that's otherwise granted under that statute 921005B2, etc. This just clarifies that after March 26, 2022, amounts authorized for expenditure from these federal ARP funds would not be eligible to be transferred or revised, changed, redistributed, or increased, except as allowed by legislative enactment. Now we are in section 2 on page 6. This is section 2 of this act, this new act, new language, just clarifying that nothing in the act modifies or impairs existing contracts or obligation that the state incurs or executes before March 26, 2022. And then section 3 provides that the bill would be effective immediately, and it needs that effective immediate date because the act relates to the March 26th date.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Any questions?
So I've got a couple different questions. So one of them is, and I'm reading in like page 2 and 3, and that section 5. If there's some matching obligations or some things that pop up that we're not anticipating, I'm just wondering if we might be tying the governor's hands. That's number one. Number two, last year we kind of had an informal understanding that so many dollars could be expended, that there's things we didn't contemplate or that came up. And I'm just wondering if we need to make some type of a catch-all or a limit or an allowance of some form or other.
Mr. Co-Chair, I visited with the governor's office about this act and this action a little bit. And what the governor's office asked me is if in doing this, that they would give the governor's office access to direct ARPA funds in case of an emergency or other thing. As of course, when you ask for direct ARPA funds, it can only be expended on direct ARPA eligible issues. But he wanted it available in case, and it wasn't so he could have it to do it. It was in case there's an emergency, if we'll see, Omicron is working its way through, doesn't seem to quite, but who knows what the next variant's going to look like. And so he wanted the ability to, he wanted the flexibility to expend $50 million in ARPA funds in case there is some kind of COVID or other public health emergency outbreak, is the way I remember my discussion with his office. And so that's why, and if we did that, Tamara, where would that go?
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that this bill does is clarify that B11, that emergency authority that generally exists under statute, the funds cannot be B11. So that could go, I think, with a change to section 7 of the Senate File 118. This language limits that. I think at a minimum, you would want to not make this change or to tweak how this change is made, and then clarify depending on how restrictive or prescriptive you want to be on what constitutes an emergency.
Tamara, the other place I was thinking is perhaps in 7, you could also go with notwithstanding. And you could do it there too. But anyway, you're the drafting expert, not me, so.
So, and just one other component of it, we just set some guidelines in the bill. Let's take the 4-to-1 match, for example. If all of a sudden, when we line up the stars, 4-to-1 doesn't work, but 3-to-1 does work, just because of the mathematics or something like that, it seems to me we ought to give the governor ability to say the intent was, or somehow B11 funds over to make sure that what we pass can be implemented, not because we missed something. I don't know how we could word that, but it just seems it'd be awful nice to give him enough flexibility to cover like loopholes that we haven't even thought of yet.
Thank you. I think that's a good point. And I would just, I know when we talk about public health emergencies, particularly with COVID-related public health emergencies, I know the governor, right now in the budget, there's $20 million of healthcare emergency, public health emergency, or economic emergency money. The difference being that's general fund money as opposed to if it's a public emergency that is eligible for PARPA expenditure, why would we not want to use the ARPA direct dollars? So, and that's the idea behind that if there's a response. So, and it's not, again, we're talking about, this conversation with him was, as I remember, with his chief policy advisor was, they were looking for direct ARPA dollars and appropriate public health emergencies related arising from COVID.
Just say for public health care emergency.
Is
X of the direct ARP fund available to the governor. He would be required to use that before he could use the other emergency $20 million. If he needed to use that match, he could do that.
That's a good thought. Great thought.
Does that make sense, Don? If we can play with some language like that, Tamara?
Kevin? You got any thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the unappropriated portion of the ARPA direct funds to a threshold available through the B11 process or emergency healthcare emergencies. We want to be careful though not to restrict the other $20 million.
No, it's just, well, and I mean, I don't think we need to do direction. I think the governor will make the right choice with respect to which money he expends in a public health emergency. If it's COVID eligible, that's why he wanted, so he could expend the COVID funds. If it's not COVID eligible, then he's got the other 20 million that he can act with.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, in that scenario, he'd have access to the entire unspent ARPA direct funds for healthcare emergency. Is that, what number are we at now, Don? 250 some million?
Yes, go ahead.
Pretty close. I actually come up with $327 million that would be available at the ARP direct only for the current permissible uses.
No, when we were talking, he was talking about 50. Again, this is the start, it's not the end. But I mean, I don't know why we tie the governor's hands if the next variation is both more contagious and this time more virulent. Why would we tie his
Mr.
hands?
Chairman, if he needs all 350 million, there probably ain't gonna be buddy left that needs it.
So,
It, pick a number, all in between,
well, I mean,
what's your comfort level?
I mean, so when you do that, you know, and I have no indication, I have no confidence in the governor, but just from our conversation this morning, when I look at the things that are available for direct ARPA, you could make deposits into potentially workers' compensation. You could make deposits into UI. You could do, I mean, you could appropriate
Everything on our list below the line.
anything on the list below the line if you don't limit it in some fashion. So,
I don't think if we restrict that to only healthcare emergencies, would he be able to go below the line under that scenario? I don't believe he could. I think it would have to be specific to a healthcare emergency if we give him that authority. But he could go in and just start funding stuff under the line if it's not a healthcare emergency.
well, I mean, ARPA dollars are for healthcare emergency, and look how broad the categories.
Well, that would be true.
I think you could have, right now, you could say that there are several hospitals in Wyoming under emergency because their hospitals are full.
Do we need to further define what a healthcare emergency would be for the purpose of withdrawing these additional funds?
I think in the interest of an economy of time of having something go forward, I think we can come up with something would do that, and we'll refine it as it goes through the process. But I do think we need to neck it down a little bit, but still, the thing is too, this governor is, you know, I have nothing but good things to say about the governor and how he's handled things and how hard they've worked, and he's been incredibly collaborative and incredibly with us, which isn't the situation in every state. So I don't want to act like.
Advocating for a position one way or another, I'm asking questions.
Yeah. So
Mr. Chairman.
I'm just thinking out loud. That's, you know, I'm just expressing kind of where I'm at. And I don't, you know, it's easy enough to say that the current COVID, the ARPA, the restrictions for direct are tight enough that, I mean, I wouldn't even mind. So going to your point, I just was pointing out the fact that.
So the number,
It's broad.
Mr. Chairman, the number that you had previously had a discussion with the governor was 50 million. I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman, that we authorize the governor with any direct ARPA funds for a healthcare emergency spending authority for the additional 50 million above and beyond what's currently allocated. Does that make sense, Don? That's what he asked for. Let's give it to him.
Okay. All right. Up second.
Second?
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And I think the intent was take Kevin and Tamara's suggestion and allow the let through the B11 process. Okay. So Mr. Co-Chair, we'll come back to you.
I forgot what I.
You were talking about direct ARPA and trying to find the right matches if guidance changes or things change or.
No, I think that I just need to see the next draft before we work on it.
Okay. Anything else, Don?
No, Mr. Chairman, I understand we will incorporate this in the forthcoming ARPA bill, and on your next Zoom meeting prior to the session, we'll also have identical language in a standalone draft. You can choose either or both at that time. Is that accurate?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? So anyway, on tomorrow. So I think what we are tomorrow is, so I think we're going to plan to allow some time to review tonight, tomorrow morning. Mr. Co-Chair, are we thinking 10 o'clock?
I think so. Tentatively, 10 o'clock.
Tentatively 10 o'clock. We'll probably have our workday start about 7-ish. For as we go through these things in our separate places, and unless might get a head start on it tonight, but is that I know we're trying to get out of here tonight, but we just ain't there yet. We got to see if we can get this done by 2:30.
Our target is to be done at 2:30.
Target is 2:15. We're going to try and target 2:15. Make sure your car is gassed up. You're not gonna have time on the way out of town.
Be sure to leave your eye vote for the bill.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks for your hard work today. Thanks for your patience, staff. Thank you for your patience, Kevin and staff. Appreciate it. We'll stand adjourned until 10